Now to this, a spaza shop association has condemned the selling of counterfeit goods to communities. This after, of course, 2 Soweto children died allegedly after eating biscuits from a spaza shop. Now, Gauteng police are investigating the deaths. Let's discuss this now further with Bongani Mabuza from the Kathorus Development Company. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I think first and foremost, let's just, get an understanding from your side about this tragedy that took place.
No, look, it's an absolute tragedy, lives lost. This is something that, could have been avoided if we controlled the supply chain of what comes into our townships. We don't control our distribution. We don't control what comes into the townships. So that effectively says anything can come in and no one is accountable for this.
Let's talk about, the counterfeit goods coming into the spaza shops. I mean, that has become a huge problem in this country. It's probably been a problem for the last couple of years already. How do we then combat this, and how do we make sure that our communities are safe from goods like these?
Look, you can understand that there's an economic crisis in our country. People are looking for cheaper options. People are looking for, affordable goods. So they do tend to, buy counterfeit goods. You would have seen, during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, how the illicit cigarette market grew, and it still exists. People are smoking cigarettes that they don't know where they come from, and equally with food, we don't know where our food comes from. So how we combat this is by empowering the locals, local associations, local formations, local groupings to be the ones that are the watchdogs, because the government doesn't have the capacity to manage this. They don't have the capacity to manage this, otherwise they would have. They cannot go spaza to spaza checking, and if they do go spaza to spaza, we know that the officials are not paid enough to not be corrupt in those situations. So our lives are at risk until we control the supply chain of what comes into the townships. We need to empower the township entrepreneurs to be the ones that run distribution, to be the ones that run the supply chain. There can't be goods that come into my township and I don't know who's bringing them in. We see trucks coming in and out of our townships, but we don't know where they come from. So when children die, we don't know who to ask. We blame the spaza owners, but these things are coming from somewhere. Where do they come from? That is what we must control. And that is how we can combat this thing, by controlling our supply chain, controlling our distribution of the goods that come in and out of our townships.
And now we know that the spaza shop where the kids purchased these cookies, the shop is owned by foreign nationals. And now angry residents say they want foreign nationals gone. They want them out of their townships. They don't want them to open up shops there because of incidents like these, unfortunately. What do you have to say about that?
Look, we in the Gauteng area, have almost 100% locally owned shops. So you can understand the sentiments that when people say, foreigners are the ones that are bringing these illicit goods, these, poisonous food into our communities. But I think, we should be very careful not to blame, to play the blame game in terms of saying foreigners and this and that, because you have big corporates also in our townships that are also selling expired goods. I'm talking big corporates that are also, existing in our townships. These are, your big retailers. So I think we should be careful not to be xenophobic, not to victimize, innocent people. But the industry definitely needs to be controlled. Locals need to be empowered to run these shops. Government need to come in and subsidize the pricing of goods, which is also what is causing people to look for cheaper options. And I think, but you're saying it's foreigners, it's this, it's that. It's just a blame game. We are blame shifting. But the main thing here is that we are not controlling what comes in and out of our township. We don't control the supply chain. We don't control the distribution. So there's an affordable sentiments, or it's this guy, it's that guy. It could be anyone, but if it was controlled, instead of who brings in goods in and out of our, our townships, then there would be more accountability.
And I think, maybe just give us a little bit of a perspective here when it comes to that controlling factor. How do you think government can, make sure that, things like this don't happen in the future again? And also, how do we then control this whole situation and these goods coming into the country?
Look, I mean, if they can control it coming into the country, we can control it coming into our townships. So every township in South Africa needs to be organized. They need to be organized, form associations, form forums, form organizations that will ring fence your township and say, who is coming? Who's bringing our bread? Who's bringing our cigarettes? Who's bringing this? Who's bringing this? I mean, I'm talking, people are counterfeiting alcohol. We had a situation in Enyobeni where kids died drinking whatever, nobody knows what they were drinking. So what I'm saying is that we need to ring fence our townships. We need to take control of our townships. The borders are compromised, as it were, but our townships don't have to be. We are the ones that can control who comes in and out of our townships, and the goods that flow into our townships need to be managed and controlled by us. And that will empower the locals to running the distribution that happens in the township, to running the supply chain that happens in the township. And if there are issues like this, that what has unfortunately risen right now, where there are deaths, then you have a situation where now we can be accountable. We know such and such a company is the one that brought those sweets, such and such a company is the one that brought that bread, brought that alcohol, brought those cigarettes, and that is why people died. And then people can account. So the spaza is just the end user at this case. They're the last point. But where do these things come from?
Thank you so much, Bongani, for your insights there about this whole situation. Of course, Bongani Mabuza, chairperson of the Kathorus Development Company, just saying, that there needs to be some accountability, and we need to control what comes into not just, the country, but also, into our communities, into places where people are very vulnerable and they do resort to the cheaper options sometimes, and that can be devastating, as we would have seen here now, where 2 children died allegedly after eating biscuits from a spaza shop. But we will be keeping you updated with this story. It is still developing. There's still investigations going on. And of course, it is a tragedy that took place there in Soweto.